Why do we keep Shabbat? What is the Sabbath? Why do we keep and follow Torah? How do we keep Torah? Who is Yahusha? Who is Yahuwah? Are Yahusha and Yahuwah the same? What are the commandments that we follow today? Is there a difference between the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament? Are they one book? Or are they two books? All these questions and more are answered as we step into our new Q&A forum. Join us as we walk through the pages of the Father's Word, rightly dividing truth to answer burning questions vital to every believer.
All right, Q&A. JP, are you there? JP, are you with me? Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right here, sir.
All right. Joe, what is today's question?
So the question is kind of like a two-part question. It has to deal with Lilith, being Adam's maybe his first wife, second wife. I'm not really sure what is said out there. But the other part would kind of take us into is also if there was a creation of man and woman before Adam and Eve to produce that. So, yes. So it's kind of a two-part thing. I don't know which part you would like to hit first, but that's where it's at.
Okay. So the first one was there a previous wife named Lilith, and according to this doctrine of this second two wives of Adam, the first wife brought sin into the world and brought destruction onto the world, which is why it was dark and void. And then Yah did the second time bring out another woman, and then sin came into the world a second time. All right, all right. So because of sin coming into the world the first time with Lilith, this is the doctrine that we hear. This is why there's a destruction, and Eve is actually the second wife of Adam. All right, so we're gonna first address that part. All right. Wow. So to establish that point, you would have to say that sin, based off of this doctrine, because we can't just recreate a doctrine that someone else created. That's one of the things that a lot of us do. What we do, we take a doctrine that someone gives to us, and we cherish it, and then when when it's proven wrong with Scripture, we then try to help the people out that gave us this information and try to make this teaching better. I know a lot of people when they go to, right now, the teaching about the Shabbats, about how the Shabbat is no longer, I've heard one school of thought, and then I hear a second one trying to basically reinforce the one that doesn't really work out much anymore. So what we have to do is we have to keep these doctrines the way that it is instead of trying to figure out a better way to explain someone else's teachings. It has to be in Scripture. So the teaching is that there was a whole nother set of people that brought destruction on the earth through sin. And that destruction occurred, and then there began another group of individuals through Adam and Eve. So there was one group of people from Adam and another person that they call Lilith. I'm not sure where in the world the name comes from, if anybody can help me out. And then now the second one. So there's a verse that I wanted to point out. Go ahead, JP.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to go to that verse, Isaiah 34:14. I'm not sure.
You can go there. It's good. Go ahead.
Okay, Isaiah 34:14. It says, "And there shall the beast of the desert meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall cry to his fellow. The Lilith also shall settle there and find for herself a place of rest." Now, the only translation that I was able to find that name Lilith was in the, I believe it's the, might be, I don't know, it says DBY translation. So, but in the Hebrew, it is Lilith there. And in the King James, they've used it as screech owl. So that was just something I just want to bring out. In the outline of biblical usage in the Blue Letter Bible says Lilith, the name of a female goddess known as a night demon who haunts the desolate places of Edom. So might be a nocturnal animal that inhabits desolate places. That's probably why they call it screech owl in the King James version. You know. But yeah, that was the only. Now I just want to bring that out because as I was looking to see if there's any other translations, no other translation has the name Lilith in it besides this one translation. I'm trying to get to the name of this actually so I can tell you the name.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. So the name, there's a lot of jumping through hoops. So we're gonna see a certain verse, and I'm trying to. I have a different Bible today, so kind of flowing through different order in the book of where certain books are. There's a verse that takes place in the book of Revelation. If anybody can do a word search together, we can see that there's a verse that says that sin will not rise again the second time. And there's a point that I wanted to make from that. All right, so let's go to the book of Nahum. Nahum. No, it's not an extra biblical book. It's a book that's in there. Nahum chapter 1. So in Nahum chapter 1, he begins to talk about Yahuwah's judgments and the judgments that's going to come when his presence comes. So we're going to start from Nahum chapter 1, starting from verse 5. And we're going to just read down so we can see kind of the context of what we're seeing. I'm going to read from the ISR. I don't normally do, but I'm going to read from the ISR because that's what I got. No, the scripture, sorry. I think that's the same thing. So verse 5, Nahum chapter 1, verse 5, it says, mountains have shaken before him, and the hills have melted, and the earth is lifted up at his presence, and the world and all who dwell in it. Who does stand before his rage, and who rises up in the heat of his displeasure? His wrath is poured out like fire, and the rocks have been broken by him. Yahuwah is good as a stronghold in the day of distress, and he knows those who take refuge in him. But with an overwhelming flood, he makes a complete end of the place of, it says Nineveh, but that's not it's added. So it says Nineveh, and he says, and darkness, and Nineveh referring to Babylon and Babylonia and things like that. And darkness does pursue his enemies. What do you plot against Yahuwah? He makes a complete end of it, and distress does not rise up a second time. Though they are as entangled thorns and as drunkards with their drink, they shall be consumed like stubble, thoroughly dried. So in my perspective, when I see this chapter, it's referring to the end of Yah's judgment on I would say Revelation calls it Babylon the Great, but I would say the corrupted world that we see occurring. So it mentions Nineveh to emphasize on a specific on a specific characteristic of people. But he's talking about the time in which he comes to bring judgment and bring it to a complete end. Obviously, after Nineveh, wickedness wasn't ended yet. there still was wickedness even in that area. So we see that he wasn't talking about at that moment, but he was emphasizing on the time in which his judgment will come at his presence, when his presence is here, according to verse 5. So when it talks about it will not rise up again in verse 9, it says he makes a complete end of it, and distress shall not, or affliction, some translations say affliction, shall not rise up a second time. This is the emphasis of him doing a complete judgment on sin. But it's interesting that he says the statement, it shall not rise up a second time, because if sin rose up and then he brought judgment previously, this would be the third time now that when he brings judgment, it wouldn't rise up. Well, he wouldn't say it wouldn't rise up again, but he would say it wouldn't rise up again the third time if there was an actual time before in which he brought judgment to this world. So the teaching of this Lilith is directly connected to the fact that there was a previous relationship between Yah and man and another woman, and sin came and destruction came, and Satan basically won. This is actually a Masonic teaching. A lot of Freemasons teach it from the Book of Genesis, about this alternate right between the verses of Genesis chapter 1, between verse 1 and 2. And this is what a Freemason told. This is what multiple Freemasons told me. They say that in between those verses is a whole bunch of different understandings that many people don't grasp. And it's because they have a whole bunch of different teachings. Lilith is one of them, and so is the idea that Yah is actually the deceiver, and that the illuminated one is the one that's trying to enlighten man. So that's a Freemason teaching of a previous thing. Go ahead, Sister June.
I can't raise my hand because of the
Right.
We have a friend. You might have heard this, Rod, talk about this friend who he was in the truth, and then he must have heard a teaching like this or similar, where there were other gods other than Yahuah, and like he went way down a rabbit hole, and so you got to be really careful with looking into some of this stuff. But I actually had a question about Genesis chapter 4. And I don't know if this goes with the part 1 question or the part 2 question better. But it reads Genesis chapter 4 verse 15. And Yahuwah said to him, who is he talking to? Okay, it says, well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taken on him sevenfold. And Yahuwah set up a sign for Cain, lest anyone finding him strikes him. So Cain went out from the presence of Yahuwah and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Hanok. And so my question is, just thinking along the lines of, this doctrine that's saying there were people before Eve, I know we studied this as an assembly, but I just can't recall what the determination was, because like if it was Adam and Eve and they bore Cain and Abel, my question is like who's around to kill him, and how did he went somewhere else to find his wife? So like where was she at? I said he went to the land of Nod, so there was people living in at least one other place called Nod.
Okay, so one of the things to consider is that Moses is narrating, right? So when he's narrating, he's talking about locations in which the Israelites at that moment with Moses would know where it's talking about. You know, it mentioned many times throughout Genesis, and this person went to this place, and this person went to this place. But when we look through Exodus, those places weren't named those things until they took over certain places, and they renamed them after different things. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that Moses is narrating for the children of Israel and to saying places, just like when you read Genesis about the 4 rivers and those places. Where in the world was those places, you know, those places named? And it says by the Euphrates. He was describing where they were located to the Israelites that knew those where they were, you know. So it's when you're looking at Genesis, right? A lot of times when you're looking down especially the patriarchs in the very beginning, they would usually mention the first son, and they wouldn't really mention all the other sons that they usually had. They wouldn't have like one son, even Cain and Abel. Like they said, you have Cain, then you have Abel, and then, you know, then it says Seth, and then it says Seth had Enos. But then when you go to Genesis chapter 5, right? Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 to 4, right? It says, and this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that Elohim created him, he made him in the likeness of Elohim. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and called their name Adam in the day they were created. Adam lived 130 years and brought forth a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. It's interesting that it's not really mentioning Cain and Abel, because now he's emphasizing on the lineage that actually called on his name. He's not talking about Cain no more, nor and Abel is dead. So the emphasis is on who is at the moment calling on the name of Yah. Now look at what it says in verse 4. It says, and after he brought forth Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he brought forth sons and daughters. So Adam brought forth sons and daughters after Seth, but there's no emphasis on all those sons and daughters. There's only an emphasis on the firstborn, Seth, and Seth's son, Enos, and then Enos' son. But it doesn't mean that that's the only son that they had. They're just emphasizing on the one that was going to take over the lead, the firstborn son. But here, interesting, is he had sons and daughters. Sons and daughters. Now, the idea of incest, to us, we're going to be like, ill, but incest is something that Yah set up at Sinai. Abraham married his sister. You know, there's a few instructions in Torah at Sinai that the patriarchs, our forefathers, did not follow. One commandment is you're not supposed to be married to your sister. Abraham was married to his sister. Doesn't matter how the sister is a sister, it was off limits for a sister. 2, you were unable to marry 2 sisters. Jacob married both Leah and Rachel, but those weren't instructions to them. They became instructions at Sinai. So a lot of times we apply what became instructions at Sinai to Genesis, and then we have this disconnect as to why, you know, those things. So Adam and Eve, when they were being told to be fruitful and multiply, they were replenishing the earth with their own lineage. They were not replenishing the earth by them mingling with anyone else. They were supposed to replenish the earth in their own lineage. So when it says that he went to Nod, it doesn't say that he went to Nod and got married. It says he went to Nod and knew his wife. That means that he had sex and not consummated. That means that he had sex with his wife. So in actuality, it doesn't say he got married at Nod. It says that he knew his wife in Nod. And when he says that they're going to kill me, it was talking about the sons and daughters that Adam had, because they were creating a nation. They were creating a nation, just like how Cain started to create a nation when he went over there. You know, so he didn't find a wife at Nod. He knew his wife at Nod. And so that has to be made very clear in order to avoid any speculation or assumption, because it's very clear. It didn't say he found her. And we know that Adam had sons and daughters, and we knew that Adam, the lineage that Moses wrote, usually emphasized on the firstborn, and not every single son and daughter that was born. So when he said they're going to kill me, he was talking about the sons of Adam, because they did have to uphold judgment. You know, I hope that was. I think
Okay.
that was for the second question, actually.
Oh, my bad.
No, that's good. That's good. That actually brought it more in depth. So I hope that it was made more clear.
No, that was
Oh,
good.
okay.
Yeah, I'll. I see Mecca has a question.
Go ahead, Emeka.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think the only thing I wanted to bring clarity on was the Abraham marrying his sister part,
Mm-hmm.
because in the Hebrew culture, your sister is not necessarily just your sister. Your sister can be your cousin. You know, so my dad had, you know, my dad's brother has a daughter. She's not considered my cousin. She's considered my sister. You know, that's why you look in the scripture. I don't think you'll ever find the word cousin in the scripture. But that's the Hebrew understanding. So like if Abraham says he married his sister, it may not have been his direct sister, but through his brother's daughter, it would have been his, you know, or through his uncle, it could have been his uncle's daughter or something like that. Where he would have considered her his sister, because that's how they do it in the Hebrew culture. You know, at least for sure in the Igbo tribe, which is where my dad is from, that's how they refer to. You
Right.
know, none of my cousins call me cousin; they call me sister. They call me brother. They call me brother. So, you know, yeah, I just wanted to bring that out. But other than that, I agree with what you said.
Yeah, it was actually the niece and nephew that they referred to as my sister, my brother. When Lot was kidnapped, he says, "I got to go and get back my brother," because that was his brother's son. You know, so of course, every firstborn son
Okay.
represents their father. So when he went to go get Lot, he says, "I need to go get back my brother." Um, but he made clear to Abimelech, he says, "This is my father's daughter." He says, "She is my.
Oh, okay.
This is my father's daughter." So
Okay.
so
Got you.
yeah, kind of
Correcting the correction.
is there. So, but we know that the instruction, when the instructions is given, that's when you're held accountable. Yah is very just and righteous. He does not holding you to instructions that you didn't know. Jacob, like I said, the Torah says not to marry two sisters lest they get jealous and rival against one another. Why did he give that instruction? Because Jacob is the example of that messed up situation. So he was not supposed to do that. Because it would have brought problems and bring that problem into the family, which we see, happen. Just like when David did something, he brought that problem into his family and his sons began to rebel. So a lot of instructions that was given at Sinai was to correct the example given by the patriarchs. Um, when you do a close examination of Genesis and Exodus, you'll see that it was like, oh, well, so instead of making them some perfect beings, we have to see how Yah is elevating his people to a perfect standard, even where our patriarchs were. We have to actually learn from their mistakes. Just like what the scripture says, it was written for our example, to learn from Israel's mistakes, all of Israel, even back to Abraham. So, but no, that was a good thing, because it's good to know when you see Lot as his brother. Somebody may get confused, but you're absolutely correct. Go ahead, Sister June.
How do you respond? I've heard people say that that prior to Moshe receiving the law on Mount Sinai, that they kept the law, like they knew it before Yah wrote it down and gave it to them. For example, Shabbat, or they made sacrifices unto Yah, and these kinds of things, that they practiced it before the law came. So, but maybe he added new ones at Mount Sinai based on some of the blunders, like, marrying the two sisters, for example, because we see Yah working despite what they did as well.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of understanding what Torah is. I think when we say Torah, everybody continuously just emphasizes on Moses, right? The word Torah means instruction, and there's instruction from Genesis to Revelation. The idea of Torah is that Yah is constantly giving instruction. He's constantly giving Torah, you know, even before Moshe wrote a book of the Torah, So the idea of Torah is, many times we try to make every single aspect of what's written in Torah always there, and you can't do that. You can't do that. Even before sin, how can you make sacrifices there before sin? Sacrifices in Torah, we all know that there was added because of sin. So because of sin, this instruction was now added to represent the removal of your sin. Before there was sin, there was no instruction for that, Passover, see, and this is my perspective, people could disagree if they want. Passover is a specific emphasis on deliverance of Egypt, and it's a very important symbolic representation of our relationship with Yah, him relieving us from the bondage of sin. So even though the context of Passover goes back, throughout Scripture is a constant emphasis of Egypt. So to go back and say that they kept Passover from the instruction of Torah in my mind, it doesn't connect. To say that they understood Passover or understood the passing over of judgment and the deliverance from bondage, of course, I believe that they understood that. That's because they believed in the coming Messiah. But as to the actual instruction of the feast Passover, which the blood on the doorpost and all those things, there's no way you can say that just because you see a word unleavened bread somewhere, So we have to understand the difference. We have to understand the difference of Torah. Torah is every single word in Scripture. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word, right? That's Torah. When Messiah quoted from Torah, there's many times where he quoted from the book of Psalms. He quoted from Isaiah. Paul quoted from Isaiah and said it was Torah. So we have to get out of the mindset that Torah is literally only the 5 books of Moshe, but because it's not. So how did Abraham keep Torah? Because when Yah gave him an instruction, he obeyed. And Genesis chapter, I believe it's Genesis chapter 26. Is it Genesis 26?
I think you're looking for 26:5.
Is it 26:5? These pages getting stuck together. Can you read it? Oh, I got it. 26. Oh, let's read 4 and 5, right? It says, I shall increase your seed like the stars of heaven. I shall give all these lands to your seed, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. So he's saying a promise to Israel, because your father Abraham have kept my, it says, obeyed my voice, guarded my charge, meaning like everything that I told him, my commands, my laws, my Torah. Now, this is emphasis that Abraham kept whatever he said. That's what he was trying to emphasize. Whatever I told him to do, he did it. Not necessarily like he had the book Torah and he was like the Levitical priesthood, and Levi wasn't even born. Where's Leviticus? How you have a Leviticus? Maybe the principles was taught to him, but you don't have a Leviticus. Abraham was not reading Leviticus, okay? You know, so we have to keep in mind whatever Yah said was his commands, was his Torah, was it, you know.
Because it was oral tradition originally before they wrote it.
It was, well, this was further back closer to perfection also. You know, the idea that man was, I mean, Abraham was, how long he died? 100 and something. This is like the normal age of dying. That's not our situation right now. People dying at 40.
I think he was 175.
175? Okay. So he died at 175. That's not, you know, we have to also recognize our bodies were different. Our minds were different. They were probably, obviously, they were able to retain things much better than we are. You know, as sin came in, as time went on, we degraded. We became worse, which is why Matthew 24, Messiah says that there's going to be a time that has never been on this earth. It's going to be the worst that has ever been. You know, for Yahushua to come at the time that he did, he came at a time where mankind was degraded in sin, and he was able to come and deliver us and walk a perfect life in that horrible, degraded life. He wasn't like the Adam living 900 years and with a perfect type of body that you could eat a fruit and you're good for days. No, he came when man was dying, sick, you know, and he overcame. And now he's telling us who's living in this age and worse that we can do it, you know. So Abraham was able to pass down the instructions orally to his son. And we can see Isaac. When you look at Isaac, you can see his life. He obeyed, you know. Jacob, he, you know, for the most part, obeyed. After that, right, JP?
Yes, sir.
I think we did we answer both of those questions with the Lilith and with Cain?
It sounds like it's you know, we're at a good standstill right now.
Okay.
You know.
All right.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha, and again, shalom.